Welcome to A Lunch with Biggie, a podcast about small business and creatives sharing their stories and inspiring you. My guest today is an Orlando, Seattle-based designer who believes that if you are sharp, be deadly, and stay sharp in your craft. One tool using to create is truly mightier than the alternative. Please welcome the designer and creator and founder of Mightier Than Co, Dan Duarte. What's going on, Dan?
What's going on, Biggie? How you doing?
Going well, man. Going well. I'm glad we get a chance to do this. I know we've talked in the past, mostly on social and stuff like that. So the fact that we get to, I'm not gonna lie. Selfishly, this is one of those things I've been wanting to have some moment to chat with you and kind of talk and learn a little bit more about the brand and tell your story. So I really appreciate it. Obviously, since we're hanging out, and it's my lunch break. What's your go-to lunch or sandwich?
I love this question. I'm a big sandwich guy, all right? So I love everything that you do. I've thought about this, and I am a tuna sub guy. I don't know if anyone on the show has had that favorite yet.
I have had a tuna sub, which is and I had a tuna sub a few episodes ago, ironically. But I'm kind of curious because she was more tuna sandwich and she makes it, so I want to know. We're gonna go now a little more specific. So are you making it? Is it sub? I want to know a little bit more sandwich detail on this.
I'll make it from time to time, but I'd say most times full hoagie, 12-inch on wheat bread, provolone, lettuce, pickles, olives. There's a weird stigma I feel sometimes when it comes to canned fish. People might not be so forthcoming when it comes to their love for this, but I make it at home. Probably my favorite is a little shop called Espadas in South Florida, if you've ever been.
Yeah.
Great shop. But I'd even settle for a pub sub at this point. And I'm going to tell you, we've been out here in Seattle for 8 years now. It's really tough to find a good sandwich shop out here. So if any of your listeners have some recommendations, like I'm all ears. I'm just going to say there's a few here and there, but being from the East Coast, being from South Florida, just the concentration of good sandwich shops is just much higher. So
Yeah. And okay, so I have to ask because when you make the tuna sub at home, and I like the fact that you do it on a hoagie roll because usually I'm the type of guy when I make it, I usually do toast or a bagel. I usually will do something like that, and I tend to actually eat it more, not even sandwich, but more like open face because I'll eat it almost like on top. But I do love a good. I do enjoy a good tuna sandwich. So my question is, when you're making it, is it tuna in water or tuna in oil?
mm. So I think it depends. Lately, I've been going with tuna and water from Trader Joe's. Actually,
Okay.
has some bomb ass tuna, and you
Yeah.
can really taste the quality. Um, Gosh, yeah, water, oil. I mean, generally water, but it depends. Sometimes you just kind of put it together, maybe just a little mayo, and that's it. But when you have
Yeah.
time to sit down and chop up all the
Yeah.
fixings and really get it nice,
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, tuna's an all-time
I
favorite.
love it, dude. I love it. I think it's under. I will say that in my house, my daughter, she's like, yeah, no. She's like, can you eat it during the day, not when I'm home, because she doesn't like the smell of it. So a lot of times, that's what ends up happening is I'll make myself a can of tuna and then I'll make it into a sandwich and then I'll just enjoy it that way. And there are some places. There's a few places that I'll actually eat it at. I've had a few people tell me they like tuna melts, which
Ooh,
is interesting because I've never really had it. Like, I'll admit it, I don't think I've ever really had a tuna melt where I'm like, oh, tuna melt. I usually will have more of like a cold. It'll usually be cold when I have it.
right on. On paper, tuna melt just sounds weird. You're heating
Yeah.
up the fish. There's cheese on top of it, but no,
Mm-hmm.
it's delicious if you do it just right. As long as you're not heating up the fish at work, and this is a whole other rabbit hole we
Oh
can
yeah.
go
Yeah.
down.
Yep.
Reminds me of one of my first jobs as a young designer. I got a contract up at Office Depot in Boca Raton, Florida, corporate headquarters. Kid out of school, I don't know what's going on. Anyway, someone would always come down to our floor to microwave their fish, and it would just bomb the entire floor. So everyone's
Mm-hmm.
thinking it's the designers heating up all this stinky food, but no, there's like a PM or someone in business coming down to escape the shame of last night's tilapia. And
That's hilarious. All right, so in 2016 you started Mightier Than Co. Tell people a little bit about how that came about, what triggered it, and tell people a little bit about what exactly it is. If someone were to like hear it for the first time and know about your brand.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, um, I should start out by saying day job a little bit, because I'll tell you a little bit about where I'm at now and how we got started. So, by day, I'm a principal product designer up at Microsoft AI. You know, we focus on a lot of like incubation and new ideas, thinking about how do we better or really make it easier for our users to browse the web and actually shop online, which is kind of like an interesting place that I've landed in my career, being that I started this online shop going back 8 years now.
Yeah.
So I started Mightier Than in Orlando in 2016, primarily as just a creative side project. It was almost out of necessity in a way where um, I didn't see the type of t-shirts that I wanted to wear online or in store. So I thought I'd kind of just sit down, start sketching up some ideas, and really tapping into a lot of the things that I'm passionate about visually, so like vintage typography, retro signs, traditional tattoos, retro cartoons, the stuff that we love, and then mashing that up with contemporary graphic design and like these little subcultures that I love. So whether it's like hip hop or skating or just all these things, and then just making some shirts out of it, and it's kind of it's grown since its inception back then in Winter Park, but we've always sort of stayed true to that ethos. Everyone's familiar with the pen is mightier than the sword. This quote's been around, since the 1800s, and it just really means that whether it's the written word or an idea, can be more influential than the alternative, rather than force or violence. So to me, any tool that you use to create with, whether it's Procreate or Photoshop, or you're writing a script or you're doing stand-up comedy, the idea is that creativity um, is going to hold a lot more weight and be able to sort of push ideas and help impact the world. So um, yeah, that's kind of where I got started with Mightier Than. Of course, I had been designing maybe like 15 years before I even got started into like the t-shirt biz, and that also was a bit of a story about just starting from necessity. So um, probably like a lot of your people that you have on here designers wise, we always kind of like start, I feel like, in this similar way, like either you're in a band or you're like working on some music project, and like you're too cheap to go out and hire a graphic designer to do the show poster, right? Or do the album cover. So I probably picked up Photoshop like in 2001 and just started messing around with it. And I remember I was throwing my first show. It was a hip hop event. It was a hip hop jam with b boys and MC battles and this whole deal. And um, I'm sure the poster that I designed for this show is god awful. I wish I can find it, but it was like the moment that I realized that I can actually sit down in front of like a piece of software and have like the temperament to teach myself something new and sort of put like this past skill set of being able to sketch and all that to use. So did that for a few years, just like putting on these shows and organizing events and working on the design skills like a little bit. But at one point I was like, I think I can get paid for this. Um, but I need to go back to school first and get my degree. So it was at that point, good old Broward Community College in South Florida, eventually graduated from FAU. And that was just like such a eye-opening experience there. I still go back, like I love all the professors, and I talk to the kids who are graduating just to kind of tell them a bit about the story and like the multiple avenues that you can take when it comes to being a designer, right? So it's not just all about branding. Like there's a whole world out there, you know. Um, and I just ended up in product design by chance, again out of necessity, and I love it. And I will say this last thing, because this is a long-winded answer to your
No, I
question.
love this. I love this.
You know, I get to use both parts of my brain when it comes to the day job and the side hustle with Mightier Than, right? Like I get to solve like these huge, complex usage problems for millions of users using like AI, which is a whole hot topic in its own. But then when I go home and I still have that spark of creativity, I can just work on a T-shirt design or a new hat for Mightier Than and exercise that whole part of my brain. So love it.
No, man, and I love that you still have that, because that's usually a lot of times what I see designers when they do like work in the corporate world, then kind of going the route of like I needed that creative, like you still have that creative outlet because you're creating your thing now instead of creating maybe with the corporate side of the house, of what you're doing. So it's a different part of, this is what I like to do, this is what I want to do, and this is kind of the reason why I did how I started my thing as well. Like it was like, even though I'm not a designer, it's like I have these ideas and I wanted to use the creativity, and and it's great to be able to kind of balance that and use that as an outlet for yourself. So you have a motto, and I mentioned it, stay sharp, be deadly. Can you talk a little bit about that motto and where it came from?
Yeah. So it's sort of just like another play on the Mightier Than concept. So stay sharp like the sword, but still be deadly, not like in a literal sense,
Yeah.
but just be prepared that you're always sharp and you're always able to kill it no matter what sort of arena that you step into. And it's sort of slightly changed over the years because I know deadly can sort of be I don't know, a triggering word for some folks. And so yeah, I mean, if you look at some of the more recent shirts, I think I'm using like stay sharp. Oh god, I'm even forgetting my own taglines now, but there's different variations depending on the design.
Yeah. And that kind of actually good. It's a pretty good. It's a great one because I like so we met online, and you were actually in Florida, and then I think by the time, because we've known each other for some time now, and then you then moved to Seattle, and I knew you had moved out there, and so that was very interesting to kind of see. I was like, man, I can't believe it. I'm like, I just met you, and you're gone, you're leaving. So I'm like, which kind of bummed me out, but I did get to. I thought it was fun because I even remember wearing. I went when the first time I went to Seattle. I purposely wore one of your shirts to wear in Seattle.
Mm,
When I got there, because I wanted to go in Pike's Place, and I took a picture wearing it because I wanted you to know, like I wanted to make sure I showed you the love.
yes.
But I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of what you said with like the different iterations and stuff like that. When I want to talk about the various collections through the years, where they came from, how you kind of
Mm,
group them, because they're kind of, there is a little bit of synergy when it comes to them, but I'm also kind of curious, like, is that on purpose, like, hey, I want to kind of theme it this, or is it kind of like these are the ideas I have? Because I tend to be scattered where I can have a focus, but then I'll have like some rando, hey, I want to make a grilled cheese shirt, it's like,
yeah.
and it doesn't match. So I'm kind of curious on like where the idea of the collections come from, and then how do you kind of group them to be like, okay, this is what this is going to be when I do this release.
Man, that is such a good question. Yeah, so thinking back to even like some of the very first designs, it was kind of a mishmash in the beginning where I just had a bunch of ideas and like this huge Illustrator file and just trying things and bouncing them off friends, like doing little impromptu focus groups and seeing what's like resonating with people. And by the time I settled on those first set of designs, I would say it was maybe only two or three. It wasn't even really like a full collection because you never know how it's going to be received. Like, am I
Yeah.
actually going to be able to sell a shirt here? And then you start seeing the sales coming in, and you know, you always remember the first time it's not a family or friend. You see that pop up, or like the first time international orders start coming in. That's really exciting. It's like, okay, so like there's something here. So let's put a little bit more thought into the meaning of some of these themes and these collections as we move down the line. And I will say there's no like really structured formula that I have. It's kind of whatever I'm feeling in the moment or that year. So in a lot of ways, I will say, as much as this is a store and a business, I don't look at it like business. I look at as a creative exercise that I use to keep myself energized. And the second that it stops being fun or it stops being fulfilling to me, I put it down and I take a step away. And there's been some times that I've done that over the years where I might go a certain amount of time a year too, even between collections, because there's maybe something else that's higher priority, but maybe I didn't have that creative inspiration at the moment. But sort of back to like the format and the formula, you know, it was one point where we traveled a couple summers and we were like out in Europe and Italy and France, and I was just like super inspired by the art there. And I'm like, I'm going to see how I can tap into this and maybe include it in some of the designs. Or like even more recently with this newest collection, the Crussers collection, like I've just been looking at a lot of like old cartoons and vintage like comics and that sort of thing. I'm like, okay, let me tap into this for inspiration. Um, yeah, so in a lot of ways, like if I go back and I look at the collections over the last 8 years, they're all a moment in time for me of whatever I was feeling. It's almost like a journal in a way.
Yeah, I love that. Do
Yeah.
you as you're doing this, like I mean, I'm assuming like are you I always love to know the creative outlet of where you put all of this create like because sometimes I'm assuming you're sketching and you're doodling and you're doing things like like are where are you keeping all of this ideas or concepts because sometimes ideas come to you and you're like ooh what about this like maybe it's a tagline or maybe it's like ooh I like to do like you did a pickleball one which is
Yeah.
hilarious like something like where like when you come up with those things and you're doing it like do you have a certain place are they notebooks? Are you going old school? Like, are you doing like an iPad, a computer? How's it all kind of, where are you kind of keeping it all together?
Yeah, it's a mix. So I'd say we'll Procreate on the iPad to sketch everything. Then it makes its way into Photoshop and Illustrator, where you start to really clean things up and flesh out these rough ideas a lot more. And then, like as far as the copy and the quotes and the taglines, a lot of that is kind of just worked out in my head and then plugged into Illustrator and sort of working the characters and customizing the type. So that's probably like the main source is really just on my computer or on my iPad
Yeah.
or in my head
Yeah.
or on Pinterest, maybe for collecting ideas and even just being out in the wild and using my phone to capture like some old patina on a sign that just looks awesome. I do that all the time. Yeah.
Do you have a folder on your phone that has that, or are they just randomly in on your
It's
phone?
it's everywhere. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite features is just being able to search by location for
Yep.
photos on
Yep.
the iPhone because I
Yep.
have like a whatever photographic memory. Or I think in pictures, so I can just remember that spot. I was there underneath that bridge, whatever it is. Zoom in Seattle, and boom, I can pull back those references.
Yeah. I was curious, and I'm always kind of curious as well. Like if it's one of those where before you start like actually pen like, let's say before the pen hits is it visually you like you're seeing it and then it's just kind of on the creative side and you're just kind of going or is it you just start kind of going and then you're kind of like pen to paper first and then things start kind of flowing in the mind and then it becomes or is it like one which one goes first type of thing.
Oh, gosh. I think it depends. Like sometimes you might have like a reference that you want to work from, or sometimes it's a brand new idea that you just start doodling out,
Yeah.
and then it'll go into Illustrator, but then it's not really good enough, or it's too clean, and maybe you want to bring it back into Procreate and add some texture and the feel of being hand drawn. So definitely a two-way street there for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. Uh, are you currently? Because I know you saw briefly, like I have my inventory here and all that stuff. So I'm kind of curious when it comes to brands and stuff like that. Are you doing it where like are certain things being shipped? Are you shipping some things, or are you at the point where as a designer, are you like is it kind of being drop shipped somewhere? How's that process working for you to kind of because that's a hard balance with like obviously with the full time job and everything like that and
Totally.
family and all those things.
Um, it's a little bit of a mix of both. When we first got started in Orlando, like doing everything from home, all the fulfillment, And it got to a point, going to the post office every day is just, it's a drain. Um, so for smaller things, pins, patches, stickers, we keep inventory here. But I'm doing almost exclusively print on demand now, which, had some hiccups in the beginning, finding the right partner that was going to have the quality that you want, or the good quality blank shirt to work off of.
Yeah.
But I feel like I found the good happy medium working with Printify and Scalable Press, and really sort of testing them out, and making sure that quality bar is still being met.
Yeah, because that's important. Nothing. I totally get that. That's kind of the hard part for me, like in the sense that because of the how I've told many people when people start asking me about brands, I usually kind of tell them like, oh, go look at a Printify and things like that. Like it would make your life a heck of a lot easier to do that, especially if you're coming up with the ideas. It's like a little, it may cost a little bit and you may take a little bit less home, but it's like it's one less of a headache of you having to do. But at the same time, like and as I say that, I have like you see all the merchandise behind me, but I also wrap everything the way I wrap it. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the balance of the balance of scales of like one you gotta, it's one or the other type of thing. Like people expect a certain level of quality now. When I ship something to them, they're expecting it in the bag, a sandwich. I mean, they want that experience, but I also want that as give them that experience. Like that's the difference where between that and maybe someone buying it wholesale and then going to a store and just picking it off the rack, which I appreciate as well. But I also love when people get to have that
Mm,
experience with me. So I totally I get that.
100%. Yeah, it's a trade off for
Yeah.
sure, because it is always nice to write that little note and throw in a couple extra stickers
Yep. Yep.
with some purchases. Um, and for certain designs or something, we might want to do like a pre-order on. Like, I love this new direction. I know this is going to sell. Maybe let's do some pre-orders, and in that way, I can work with the screen printers here locally and sort of just do a limited edition drop, which is
Yeah.
something we've done in the past, and that's always nice. Speaking of screen printing, I'm recently just getting back into it and setting up the whole press right here in our new home office. But it's just going to be for like a side project, which is not even apparel. Like, I really kind of just want to get a little bit more hands on with some mixed media prints. So there might be some interesting like art and posters coming out of Mightier Than in the near
Very
future.
cool. Very, very cool. That's awesome. I love that. I think that's a fun angle to be able to go. I think and especially like, a few colors. Is it like a few color press or is it like a one color press or you got like are you playing
It's
around with a few
four
colors?
colors, but
Okay.
you know, getting the registration to dial in on this thing is, we're fine tuning it.
Yeah.
So I've been just working in one or two colors
Okay.
right now. Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I look forward to seeing that. I love what you're doing and the art you're creating, and I've always been a fan of your brand. So that's something that I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to come back with next. Obviously, I'm going to have to try to find wall space because it's getting harder and harder in my office.
Right.
You've mentioned and stuff like that like there's a creator in all of us. So I kind of want to know when you're in a creative rut, how are you getting out of it?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one. I think it kind of goes back to the idea of being able to sort of step away from from the work when you're just not feeling it. Like, there's going to be days where you're just on and you got a million ideas and you're working quickly. But, some days I may want to go pick up a book or a video game or go do a walk with the family. And I think that's okay,
Yeah.
to keep that pressure on to kind of like make sure the business is successful is always something like I didn't want, you know? And maybe it kind of comes down to like being able to stomach the risk of, going full time with it. There's something nice about having the backup plan, as it were. Um, but yeah, I mean, as far as getting the inspiration going, and maybe it's just that, it's just stepping away and doing all those other things that you're passionate about to help keep you refreshed, so when you do sit down, uh, you avoid getting burned out, man, because it's real and it happens to all of us, for sure.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And that's why I'm always kind of curious on how, because when you're thinking of something and trying to stay on brand, or stay in the realm of the brand, but at the same time, kind of push yourself, and at the same time not fall into the same thing. And that's kind of one of the things
Mhm.
I've noticed, like on your brand, is like the collections, like you said, which makes sense as you're in your creative style, where you're at in your life. The different collections have kind of, there's different designs as you go through, on the website and everything like that, through the different collections. So yeah, no, which is fantastic. How do you balance? How have you been balancing, especially since, like, I know you talked about, your corporate, your principal product designer. How do you balance the brand, corporate life, personal life? How are you kind of working all those things?
Yeah. um you got to keep the lights on, for sure. And I think, you know there's certain things that you learn about being a business owner and an entrepreneur that just lend themselves to being good anywhere that you go. I think about the early days of when I was like making music and in hip hop groups, and um, having to do all that DIY stuff that I mentioned. Like, this is the best boot camp for any entrepreneur, because you just have to figure it out on your own and connect the dots and make the connections and get the show organized and print up the merch. You take that skill set and you dump that person into corporate America, uh, let's say next to some other very very talented designers, but maybe they're just coming right out of school and they haven't had that real life experience. They maybe don't have that grit where they had to go figure out this shit on their own.
Yeah,
Like, I'm going to put my money on the person that kind of was figuring stuff out, only because there's a certain resilience that you have to build as a person and as a business owner. You're going to fail. You're going to fail a lot. You're going to fail every single day. And I mean, this is going to sound cliche, but like, you have to learn from every single one of them and do your best not to repeat those mistakes, but use them as learning opportunities, right?
yeah,
So, I mean, this is kind of veering off from the whole balance thing, but I think one sort of fuels the other. So, like, maybe I'm dealing with a customer service issue in like on the Mightier Than side, and like, I got to deal with that every single day with 10 other personalities inside of this huge corporate beast, right?
yeah.
So, I think one sort of keeps you sharp in the other. And yeah, that's the best boot camp ever. Just
Yeah.
being your own self starter.
So you talked about music, and I know that you're in, like, you talked about it, and I know you're like into hip hop. Do you have, like, so tell people a little bit about that, because I think you and I kind of briefly chatted before we started that you kind of took a little bit of put a little backseat on, maybe in the background you had some music stuff going on, while you were also doing the brand. So tell people a little bit about that kind of those type of projects that kind of also, I'm assuming, also help influence Mightier Than Co as well.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So, um, kind of been making hip hop for a long time, probably since like the early 2000s. And I think I mentioned, organizing shows and open mics and rap battles and that sort of thing. But definitely, found my stride, I think, better as an organizer and a designer. And every now and then, I might get up with some friends and jam or get into the studio and make a song here and there. But primarily, it kind of went on the back burner for a very long time while I focused on my design career. But at the beginning of COVID, I met some really cool folks up here. One of which I work with, and they're all into music, and they had a studio, and they said, "Hey, let's kind of come up with this whole little side project thing." And yeah, I actually put the t-shirt stuff on hold for a little bit when I was getting really passionate about making music again. Um, and I will say, one of like the most fulfilling parts about that is, I mean, not just getting back in the studio and coming up with these records, but creating the branding and the whole visual identity for the band, because it was very much like sort of a mixed genre, sort of trip hop thing, leaving a little bit out of my like comfort zone of making just normal boom bap rap music. And yeah, we did some videos and we put together a bunch of like cool visuals and merch, some of which you can actually find on the Mightier Than shop. But yeah, it was a cool little couple years side experiment. Definitely had a ton of fun doing it. Um, and yeah, if anyone's interested, it's called Binary States.
Yeah,
That's
we're gonna put it on the show notes. I want to see more about it as well. So I'm gonna put it on
yeah,
the show
yeah,
notes. While I'll have you send me links to the stuff. So we'll put it in the show notes so people can maybe listen to it. If there's stuff on Spotify and Apple Music and stuff like that, or YouTube, they can go check it out as well as
yeah,
online. So
absolutely.
we could definitely do that. Because I love that. I love being able to see that. And I'm assuming when so out of curiosity, when you took the to step back on doing some mightier because you were working on music side, did that at all give you like reinvigorate you or give you new ins like kind of like I don't know, give you something more ink to your pen in order to kind of
Mm,
get you to come up with new things for the next iteration or next collection of mightier then.
I think so. Yeah, that's spot on. Because Mightier Than's always sort of been just like that outlet of whatever's going on in my mind. So when we worked on the band stuff, it was just kind of funneling that creativity there. But the visuals were so unique for the band; they're completely out of the realm of what Mightier Than does. So yeah, I mean, by the time I came out with the collection that followed that up, which I think was called the Comeback Collection, because I had took 2 years off, and I'm like, wow, I really do miss this. I really miss sort of sitting down and coming up with like a collection, like this whole set of cohesive ideas that work together. Um, and they're like on a t-shirt, which is almost like my favorite thing to design for. Um, I went down this whole rabbit hole like just years ago to kind of like, where did this start? Like, how long have t-shirts even been around? I mean, they can't have always been a thing, right? Um, but they're very much like ours, and they describe our identity, and they're our way of expressing ourselves every day. So yeah.
No, that's so accurate. I mean, it's kind of I sometimes joking. I tell myself the same thing. I'm like, why did I pick out of all t-shirts out of all the things? But that's it makes sense. Every what you're saying it makes total sense, and it's like I absolutely love it, and it's a great thing to be able to see. And I love especially when I do markets or when I'm like at events. I love seeing. And even when I go to like when we used to back in the day, we used to go to the theme parks more. I used to love seeing like what people are wearing because that would inspire me. But at the same time, also then I'd be like, oh, like what is it that people wear? What do
Mm.
people like to wear? Because obviously I know what I like to wear, but like what do they like to wear? So I'm like I always love seeing like what form of expression they're showing when they're wearing a t-shirt.
Well, 100%. You don't even realize it, but even like coming up as a kid, like walking the mall, like observing the trends and the fashion that's out there, like
Yeah.
it's always just, I've always just soaked it up without even realizing it.
Yeah.
And, you know, even outside of designing a shirt, I think just like being aware of what's happening and what's relevant and what, people are gravitating towards visually is what, keeps us sharp as
Hmm.
designers. So, um, and now you got me thinking back to that rabbit hole of the creation of the t-shirt. So it just came to me, and I remember because I looked this up, and I'm trying to think back. So it was probably like the 20s, I want to say. I'm sure someone in the comments is going to correct me on this, but like the t-shirt just started as just attire for like the army, right? It was an undergarment. It was never, the t-shirt was never
Like the
worn.
undershirt.
Right, exactly. It was underwear. And then it was like Marlon Brando who like popularized it, and like Rebel Without a Cause, or he's riding a motorcycle with just this white t-shirt. Like how dare this man walk out the house with underwear, but he looks badass, man. He's a rebel, right? And that just, next thing you know, people are wearing shirts on the outside. And then in the 60s, they started to be used to print social messages and with everything that was happening then. And now, I mean, it's history ever since.
Yeah,
Just a staple.
it is. It is. So you've been doing this now for 9 years as a brand. I'm kind of, I know, I kind of want to know a little bit about like, what lessons have you learned along the way. Most brands, and I mentioned this to you before, and obviously because we both have been doing this for a while, most brands don't last this long. At least not, so what do you think has been your recipe for success?
Mm, yeah, I think there's probably a few different factors, but probably the biggest reason is really kind of what I mentioned earlier, just being able to step away when maybe you are getting burnt out, and giving yourself that time to get recharged and re-inspired to put time back into it. And listen, there's been times where, like, maybe not this year, or like maybe it's been a slow few months. Like, do I want to keep doing it? Is the juice worth the squeeze here? But to me, it's more than just, the success monetarily. Like, that's never been my motivator in life. It's always been, I've always been fulfilled by different causes, and it's just not about the money for me. So,
Yeah.
um, sure, I could do it forever, but I probably reach a point where maybe I pause it for even longer. Now I'm like starting a family, and we had our first child this year, and that kind of even changes things in a lot of ways. Where I may not have the time to put out a collection, and I think that's okay. Like, to put that pressure on yourself is definitely not fair if if this isn't something that you're feeling at the moment. So, and maybe that just transforms into something else, or like another hobby, or just being with the family. And I think that's okay. And I think
Yeah.
people probably put too much pressure on themselves to kind of consistently, hit that mark or whatever goal that they have. So,
And I agree with that. And I think to a part, and for a long time, at least for me personally, I know that for a long time I kind of would beat myself up on the fact that I had a full-time job and I was doing this on the side,
mm,
as like my other whatever full-time job, but I did it like when I had free moments, and on weekends and the evenings and things like that. But I also think that that's kind of what's helped me survive it, because it wasn't that I needed to depend on it in order to support, as my life changed, because obviously depending on where you are in your life, it's a lot different when you're 20 something and you're not, and you don't have a family and you don't have a mortgage or you don't have certain things. There's certain levels. So that's kind of one thing, at least, that I've learned. I'm going into 12 years as a brand, and like,
wow.
that's kind of, for me, I think what I've now understood is that this is what's given me the opportunity, is that I'm able to let the business. I've also had the patience, because a clothing brand is obviously not a make rich. You don't get rich. Like, a lot of, you're not going to hit the lotto sometimes on some of these. Sometimes you do, but like, it's a long, slow process.
Hmm.
And a lot of times people don't have the resources or the ability to do it. But because of the fact that I kind of been able to, because I have a full-time job, and I've been able to figure out about somewhat of a balance of trying to do it, I've kind of realized, at least in my own world, that what I used to think, what I used to hate, the fact that I wish I could do this full time. I'm kind of now, kind of at the same time, going, well, you know what? I don't know if I would have been able to continue doing this, or I would have enjoyed it as much, because it is like you said, it's like a creative outlet for me to be able to do those things. So I totally get that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's tough, man. And I envy anyone that's able to kind of take that leap of faith
Yeah.
and put it all in on something and really do it and make a success out of that. Like,
Yep.
that's fantastic. I think I probably recognized that early on. I'm like, I don't know if I have the stomach to
Mm-hmm.
be a true entrepreneur that way. So maybe in a lot of ways, this is like the anti entrepreneur talk
Yeah.
that I'm giving. So I'm
No.
not pep talking up But this, to me, the side hustle is the fulfillment. It's
Hmm.
having that extra thing to pour
Yeah.
yourself into that really becomes the big payoff.
Amen, dude. That's the reason why I do this podcast as well. I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons. I use it selfishly for as a creative outlet, but I also do it as a way for me to hopefully be able to spread the word on a different person. Someone else gets to know about them, and that's kind of why I do this. I do this because I kind of, I don't know, if I could help another brand or another small business or creative to at least get noticed or make someone aware of them and connect them. I mean, that's what else? I mean, that's money right there for me. I'm
Mm,
like, I get joy out of that. I love being able to connect folks.
I love that.
Yeah. What advice do you have for someone wanting to start something?
Yeah. So this is tough. I mean, thinking back to how I got started, even before Mightier Than, like when I thought design might be a potential career for me, I took on every piece of work that was thrown my way, from the landscaper's business card to Joe Schmo's logo, and I did it for dirt cheap or sometimes just for free because I love doing it and I love connecting with people and collaborating. To me, this is so fulfilling. And I did that for years. Like, even to put myself through college, I didn't have a part-time job. I was already working as a freelance designer. And, while I didn't like break the bank, it's again the experience that you gain while you're doing that
Yeah.
becomes like the wealth of knowledge that you're going to have that's going to make you successful down the line. So, to anyone thinking about getting started, like maybe in this industry, um, take on whatever work, mom, pop, uncle, cousin, if they need something done, like a t-shirt design, just do it and do it for the free and love working with them. And I think sometimes we can get caught up in like, oh, but I've invested so much time into this thing, and you know, no one's working as hard as I am. This sort of self-inflicted thing, like that's not the way to look at it. Like, you are gaining the richness of the experience by working with these people, and that's your payoff, and that's going to make you that much sharper down the line and make you a success.
No, I love that. And it's so true. It's so true. And it goes with your idea. Stay sharp. It's like you're gaining all this experience, you're sharpening your tools, you're learning from, all these different experiences all build up into creating this foundation for you to be able to do things. So I think that's, great advice on doing that. And it's okay. It's okay to humble yourself and do some opportunities
Oh
and
yeah.
do things for the love and because that's why you're doing it. And I think when you start doing stuff like that and people start seeing those things and they start seeing it in your brand and your work and all those things, like they see that passion, it all kind of starts flowing and people can see that and it gravitates them to you to want to work with you and collaborate with you and things like that. So I totally agree with that. Where can people follow you, shop for Mightier Than Co? See if they're listening to this and scrolling on their phones and they want to check out some of the collections and do some purchasing of maybe hats, stickers, maybe future prints, some shirts. Where can they follow you and see all that?
Yes. So the shop is mightierthan.co. Instagram is probably the best way to keep up with what's new and all the new drops. So that's at Mightier Than Co. And yeah, even follow me on IG. It's Dan Duarte Design. Um, yeah.
No, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat. I know it's something that I've been wanting to do, and I was waiting. Once I saw the collection come up, I was like, "Oh, great!" I'm like, "This is great." I'm like, I've always been wanting to chat with you and catch up and kind of be able to do this. So I do appreciate you taking the time to chat with me about this.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Biggie. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, you're very welcome, man. That's our show for today. Thank you so much to Dan Duarte of Mightier Than Co. For being on and having lunch with me. Definitely make sure to check them out. When you see the show notes, make sure to check out some music. I know I'm going to be checking out. I'll be checking out my Spotify and seeing what I can find there. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to tell your friends. Leave a comment. Hey, if you find someone that kind of said some spoke to you, share it, man. Let the guests know as well. I mean, I definitely think it's super important. If you want to support me, check out my brand, Deli Fresh Threads. Do some shopping, eat a sandwich. If you're in Seattle and you listen, and you know of a sandwich shop that's worth anything, definitely let Dan know because he's on search. But thank you till next time. Keep eating sandwiches and follow your passion.